From the land of lakes, this is 10,000 Takes, brought to you by Minnesota Score Radio. Wally and Eric back for yet another week as we slice and dice the always busy, always topical, super saturated Minnesota sports scene. And Wally, we are crawling our way towards late July and August. That means the NFL is about ready to Bigfoot every other sport on earth. Training camp just days away. I know you have a calendar in your man cave that you hunker down in often. You rip the days off, and now what do you have? You probably have a clock going, don't you?
Oh,
like
yeah.
New Year's Eve.
Yeah, the countdown is on, baby. I don't know. I'm just, let's put it this way. It ain't what it used to be, both as a media member and as a fan. Obviously, you're not going to Mankato anymore as far as the Vikings are concerned. You go out to Egan, and it's all kind of pre-programmed. Whereas, back in the day, it was pretty loose. As a fan, you show up, you stand outside the fence, you watch practice. They had some bleachers set up. Some fans would be able to get into those. But now you got to buy tickets. You got to pay to park, you got to pay. I mean, it's the whole thing is just
the joy and the fun and the spontaneity of it all has been just it's ruined. It's corporate, just like the NFL. And our younger viewers out there probably don't remember the Cheese League. Now we all know about the Grapefruit and the Cactus League, Major League Baseball, spring training. Once upon a time, the Upper Midwest was the epicenter of NFL training camps. The Cheese League. You had the Packers over there in Des Peres, Wisconsin. The Saints were in La Crosse. The Bears were in Platteville. The Chiefs were in River Falls. And the Vikings were in Mankato. You could, in about 3 or 4 days, click off a bunch of camps if you wanted.
Yeah, and you could. And there were a lot of inter-squad scrimmages back then between those teams.
And brawls, too.
And
Chiefs and Vikings had a legendary brawl in River Falls.
Yes, they did. As a matter of fact, I remember going over to River Falls, and that's huge. That's my alma mater. And I can tell you, that was a big deal for River Falls. They did upgrade the facilities as a result of the Chiefs being there. The practice fields got way better than they were when I was in college, and the whole situation was better. I remember going there and covering it, and Joe Montana was there. So the circus is in town, basically, because you've got this future Hall of Famer who, of course, led the 49ers to, 2, 3 Super Bowl titles? He's trying to get the Chiefs the same thing, and he got them to the AFC Championship once. But I just remember the media throng following Joe Montana was incredible. And it was one of those things that, you don't get now because, as I said, it's so programmed. You're standing outside the fence. Now you've got to literally pay to get in. Of course, none of those teams are in Wisconsin anymore. They're all back in their own hometowns now. So,
Montana had the paparazzi. You're right. I remember there was a rumor going around River Falls that somebody had a beer can that he drank the night before after practice. And they were probably eBay didn't exist then, but they would have put it on eBay had it existed. And Marcus Allen was there, and Dick Vermeil, and
this is the 90s. It's not 100 years ago.
Not that long ago. No. Yeah, and of course, the Vikings back when they started were in Bemidji.
Right.
And their head coach was Norm Van Brocklen, and he ran a boot camp. 2 practices a day.
Oh, boy.
And, it would get hot in Bemidji, even in the summer. And they would be out there grunting and groaning and sweating. And then Bud came in and toned things down.
As a matter of fact, Bud would bring the Vikings to camp last. Of every NFL team, the Vikings were either dead last or right there.
And they'd win the division every year.
And they'd win it every year. They probably got further because, Bud wanted to fish and hunt, and he didn't want to go to camp.
Bud, less is more. It paid off for him and those great purple people eater teams. Yeah, I've covered a few NFL camps. Perhaps my favorite was the San Diego Chargers in La Jolla. That wasn't camp. That was a day at the beach. You could see the ocean and the breezes coming off the Pacific.
Boy.
And I said, well, no wonder the Chargers don't win the Super Bowl. This is too cushy.
Yeah. Well, speaking of cushy, you've been out to the Vikings facility now out in Egan. The players have it really good. The locker room facilities are tremendous. The practice facility, they got multiple practice fields out there now. They have, some indoor space if and when they need it. And then they have a stadium, literally. And, of course, again, when they do have inter-squad scrimmages now, and or if they're playing against other teams, if they scrimmage against other teams, they have the stadium to use. which is great. Actually, there's more things that are non-football in that stadium that are somewhat relevant than there are football these days. They use them, during the offseason. They're playing soccer in there. They're playing lacrosse. And they played rugby there a couple of weeks ago. So getting a lot of good use out of it. But, again, it's not like just driving down to Mankato on a whim and going and watching practice and then going and watch that scrimmage at the end of training camp, that first full scrimmage type of thing where the stadium down in Mankato was filled.
Yeah, and what the NFL does now, the closest thing to maybe having a little fun are these joint practices. And I think it benefits the Minnesota Vikings playing in the North. Yeah, I think Tennessee's coming in this season.
Right.
Well, you want to get out of that sauna-like heat in Tennessee.
They're
Arizona, same thing. Last year, San Francisco came in. We were out and saw one of those practices, and that was a lot of fun. Trey Lance, the high school team from Marshall, Minnesota, showed up, the head coach. Somewhere out there was Brock Purdy, although nobody knew who he was. Little did we know he would become this rock star for about 2 months. But so they'll have joint practices again here in Minnesota, and that'll be at Eagan if you want to go to the TCO Performance Center. Better buy those tickets soon, though. You got to go online and jump through all those hoops.
Yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of the whole corporate scene and how training camp just isn't what it was. It's just, I don't know. Maybe I'm just old school, man. Or maybe I'm just old.
Well, maybe both, but I will say this. It was, having done both, it was more fun back then.
Yeah.
There weren't as many rules.
Question.
You didn't have to jump through as many hoops and, hop over ropes and all that. And the security wasn't as intense.
Right, and the autograph lines for them, when they'd come off the field after practice, the kids and whoever would stand there and they would sign autographs as they're coming off the field, and they'd spend a lot of time, most of them. Now they have autograph lines, but it's all choreographed ahead of time, and you gotta be there at a certain time, and there are only so many people that are going to get autographs in the autograph line. I don't know. It's not very spontaneous, if you ask me.
No, the NFL and the NFL teams all train at their own facility now.
Yeah.
Long gone are the days of these players staying in college dorms for a couple weeks.
Oh boy.
All right, stick around. A lot more coming up. We're going to talk more Minnesota Vikings with Chuck Foreman, who recently found out he's going into the Miami Hurricanes Hall of Fame. And we'll tee it up with Mike Welch from the 3M Open. This is 10K Takes. Your Mankato, we miss you ticket.
Look at this.
Look at that.
Oh, yeah. That's the one thing you couldn't do.
Welcome back. 10,000 Takes, Wally and Eric. And as we discussed in the first segment, training camp just around the corner as we count the days down. I thought we'd maybe take a look back and hear from the other side. What are the players thinking about as they head into training camp? And who better than to talk about just that? Our good friend Chuck Foreman, number 44, should be in the Hall of Fame, is in the Vikings Ring of Honor. Chuck, when you hear the word training camp, and I mean while you were a player, not since retirement, but when you hear the words training camp, what comes to your mind back in the day, back in the 70s, when you were part of the training camps that Bud Grant ran?
I was excited about training camp, to be quite honest with you. That's, of course, until it got really hot in the evening. Yeah. But the thing about Bud and the Vikings at the time is like Bud was a good time manager as far as how long he'd keep you out there. And the main thing was he insisted that you don't come to training camp to get into shape. You better be in shape before you get to training camp. And that was his philosophy back then. Of course, nowadays, the guys, they got their own gyms in their own houses and they got their own personal trainers. You had to do all that on your own.
Chuck, you brought up Miami. The news broke recently. You're going into the Hurricanes Hall of Fame. Congratulations. I think Jimmy Johnson, Dennis Erickson also going to be inducted. You wore number 32 back then you come up to Minnesota, you get 44. Is that because Oscar Reed had 32, or did you want to go to the double fours?
No, Oscar had 32. But by the way, it's the Ring of Honor down at the University of Miami, because I'm already in the Hall of Fame down there. This is kind of like look, I guess must be a step up.
Icing on the cake?
Yeah.
I guess it is, but better late than never.
Chuck, back to your training camp days with the Vikings. What did those consist of? Those two-a-days? Because we know how hot it can get in Minnesota. Certainly, even the last couple of weeks has been evidence of that. But what are your memories of those training camps and how you guys battled through the heat in those two-a-days?
Well, it was tough, and they always used to frown upon you if you got water when you got hot. Back in the stupid days, that was no, really, that's the way they thought. Oh, you got water, you weren't tough enough, and all that. Forget the fact that your body was telling you, "Hey, I'm thirsty," but it was kind of like the more you did, and the more you could endure, supposedly, the tougher you were.
Well, it clearly has evolved. I remember back in the day, Frank Cush at Arizona State, they ran 3-a-days in the triple-digit heat out there in the desert. So it has changed. Do you think one of the seminal moments, Chuck, was when tragically we lost Corey Stringer on one of those sauna days in Mankato back in 2001? He collapses and never got up. That was a horrible day.
Yeah, that was, and I don't know what the structure was back in those days, other than, Corey was a big guy. I don't know whether we don't know what happened, other than the fact it was a very hot day, and maybe, did a little more than it should have done, or what have you. We lost a great guy, great player, and I think that in itself woke up a lot of people as far as what's necessary during training camp, as far as player being able to address the player's needs.
Yeah. So as the Vikings go to training camp later on this month, the number one running back will be Alexander Mattison. Dalvin Cook is gone. Your thoughts on Alexander Mattison as being the go-to guy this year?
Well, I think Alexander Mattison, it's his time. I thought that, it was his time to step forward. I think Dalvin Cook, of course, is a great player. He's going to be I think he's going to even have better years down there wherever he goes to Miami, that's for sure. But I think, money enters into it, of course. And so I think as a running back, when you get up to year 7, first of all, they depreciate you every year anyway. I didn't know whether you guys know that or not. But he got to that point where depreciation, cost factor, do I keep him or do I trade him while he's still, do I want to keep that contract? And then we got this guy here that's ready to go, Alexander Mattison, and he's been ready to go, so you got to give him his chance. So, it's all about the money, not that he can't play, but that's basically what I think it is. I think Alexander Mattison will do a great job up here.
Chuck, does it bother you? You were a superstar running back. I mean, you caught the ball, you ran the ball,
Right.
multidimensional, MVP level. But they do devalue running backs. Saquon Barkley, Dalvin Cook, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs out there with Las Vegas. Why is the NFL all of a sudden said we don't care about running backs?
I don't know what the deal is, but you tell me a team that doesn't have a great one, I'll tell you one that won't go to the Super Bowl. Now, they can devalue it all they want, and that's basically all because of the money. And then the running back does take a little more pounding, so his life expectancy, let's say, in the league is a little shorter than most positions. That's for sure. And so, like we were just talking about Dalvin, and that's why they're moving him now, because he's still got enough in him where they can trade him and get some value for him, but not have that contract in place. And now they got Alexander Mattison, who can really play, but his value as far as dollars go fits into what they want to do. So the running back, for some reason, they're trying to devalue him. But they've been depreciating running backs. And the running backs are depreciated quicker than the other positions, but they do write you off, and they do depreciate each player every year. I didn't know whether you know that or not, but they do that. And so, unfortunately for the running back, that happens quicker than the others.
All right, last question for you quickly. Are you optimistic about the 2023 Minnesota Vikings? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
Well, I'm optimistic about the upcoming season simply because, first of all, I like the coach. He relates well with the players. I like the talent that they have on the team, number one. I think as much as we always doubt Kirk Cousins as far as his escapability, but if they got everything in place, because if the front lines are in place, offense and defense, this team can do some great things. And if they shore up that offensive line and give Kirk the time to get the ball to these great receivers, I think three of the finest in the game, right now, even though we got a rookie in there and he's coming in. But I think the talent-wise, in the tight end, receivers, I think they got some of the best in the conference. And so there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to do better.
All right, Chuck. Appreciate it. Go answer that phone, and we'll talk to you again
Jimmy
soon.
Johnson, pick it up.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chuck. He is Chuck Foreman, Vikings all-time great, right here on 10,000 Takes. We're back with more. We'll be talking some golf right after this timeout.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect. Maya? Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
We're talking some golf now here on 10,000 Takes, and it's just about that time of year. The 3M Open coming up at the end of July, and joining us now is the tournament director for the 3M Open, the PGA Tour stop that comes to Blaine every year. Mike Welch, give us the 411 on why folks should be excited to come out to Blaine for this year's tournament.
Well, we've been saying this for a number of years now, Wally and Eric. We want to make it more than just a golf tournament. If you're a core golf fan, we're going to have 156 of the best players in the world, right? We're going to have, right now, we have 8 of the top 45 in the official world golf ranking. Expect to have a couple more. So we're going to be fine just there if you're a core golf fan. But if you're what we call a golf curious fan, an event seeker, it's what is going to bring you to the 3M Open. And so for us, it's about having new things every year. So this year, you're going to find new things like a party deck on hole 18. You're going to have 3M to have a new fan hub that replaces their old Science Dome. It's how do we have fun activations that for families, for event seekers that make you think like, we just can't miss the tournament this year. We can't go to the cabin. We can't go on vacation. Let's circle this date. And so we think we have a couple new additive experiences for families and event seekers this year.
All right, the slogan is golf that matters. For the hardcores, Tony Finau's coming back trying to defend his championship from a year ago. He's got 6 tour victories, and he seems to be trending up, number 14 in the world. But what about the Finau family? I caught a glimpse of him last year, Mike, when he won and got the trophy. The kids are there. The wife is there. They travel with him. They've got that Netflix special, Full Swing, that they're a part of. He's kind of a rock star, isn't he?
He is, and we're so excited to have him as our defending champion. During media day, we patched Tony in, and he spoke about how his family is so excited to come back to Minnesota. He said it's the only time all year where his family asks about fishing, and he doesn't know why. And so we said, well, Minnesota has the best fishing, of course. So the family's super excited to fish once again. Tony has family here from a restaurant standpoint, so they're excited to get back there. The Full Swing docuseries has been a revelation for the PGA Tour. Not only is Tony coming, but Joel Damon, who was featured prominently in one of those episodes, is coming back to the 3M Open. all of these folks that were in that full swing doc either doubled or tripled their social media following.
All right, there's a lot of tournaments from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. What do you sell? What does Hollis Cavner sell to these players to get them to come to the 3M? What makes them want to play here in Minnesota on an annual basis?
Yeah, as you know, Wally, it's in a tough spot on the schedule, right? It's
No
the
doubt.
week after the British Open. There's a lot of folks that, and by the way, the Genesis Scottish Open is happening this week. So now you're in Scotland, then you go to England. Do you want to come to Minnesota for 3 weeks in a row? So you're right. It's a tough spot. However, I think what you hear from the players when you ask them is, number one, we take care of players, caddies, and players' families and caddies' families better than any tour stop on tour. That's important, and so if you're weighing our tournament between one of the other ones, like the one John Deere that just happened this weekend, or the Wyndham that's directly after ours, and you're trying to fill that schedule, things like that matter, right? What's happened with the PGA Tour and the FedEx Cup playoffs starting this year has also helped us. As you guys well know, the top 125 used to make the playoffs. Now that's down to the top 70. And what's more is after our tournament, it's one more event before the FedEx Cup playoffs start. So you look at a guy like, I'm just throwing a name out there, Justin Thomas, who is number 70th on the FedEx Cup standings. If Justin doesn't play well in the Scottish and in the British, he's going to need points to not only get into the playoffs, but the next step is, once you're in the playoffs, you have to get to the top 50 to get to the second event. And if you're in the top 50, that automatically exempts you from next year's designated events. And as you guys well know, the designated events is what every player wants to get into because those purses are $25 million. And so our tournament has become more relevant and more popular for every PGA Tour player, number one, to get into the FedEx Cup playoffs, but number two, to help secure your spot in those designated events next year.
Let me play TMZ reporter. We know Kyle Rudolph is going to show up, NFL tight end, used to play with the Vikings. Larry Jr., Charles Barkley, the celebrity event. Can you tip us off?
Larry will be back. Chuck, Chuck hasn't returned my phone calls in a while, which I don't really take offense to that because Charles is a busy guy. He had an interview on Pat McAfee once where he said that he gets about 15 to 20 calls per month for people to come do a charity event. So listen, I get it. Now, what I told Charles, I can promise you great fishing, which he's a huge fisherman, and great golf. And those are his two passions. So we'll get Chuck back at some point. So you're going to get a good mix of athletes. You're going to get a good mix of celebrities. And I think, if you're into that influencer golf meme space, you're going to be really happy. One of the things we're doing new this year, guys, is the Stilly Party Deck on hole 18. So it's just off of Golfers Right. If you're Matthew Wolf, if you remember him from our 19 champion 2 years ago, he hit his drive on 18 way off to the right and still made par. Well, now there's a party deck there, and you're going to get all you can drink Stilly. That's where some of those athletes and influencers will be hanging out. Again, just back to how we opened it, we're trying to make this thing fun year after year to just make a little uniqueness to the 3M Open. And we feel like we're doing that. And we have help from great partners like 3M, like Stilly, who can help us bring that to life.
Great stuff, Mike. We appreciate the time. Good luck with this year's tournament. And I'm sure we'll be touching base during the tournament week.
Yep. Thank you, gents. Appreciate your coverage.
Thank you.
All right. He is Mike Welch. He is the tournament director for the 3M Open, which comes to Minnesota in Blaine at the end of this month. Stay with us. More coming up after this timeout.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
Look at this.
Look at that.
Oh, yeah. That's the one thing you couldn't do.
10K Takes on television, getting set to wrap up yet another episode. But before we go, takes of the day. Are you a happy camper?
Probably not.
Angry American, sarcastic Sam, soggy cornflake. What is it today?
Soggy cornflake. What is wrong with you? Well, I tell you this. I think I may have figured out what's wrong with the Minnesota Twins. As you know, roller coaster season this year. Up and down, a lot of down, and then some up and right around the middle most of the way, right? Well, I finally figured out what the problem is. It's that stupid M logo that they indoctrinated this year, that thing with the star on the top that looks like, yes, the Miami Marlins. Matter of fact, I was talking to a friend at a park the other day, and I said, did you actually buy that thing? He was wearing one of those hats, and he said, yeah, I bought it. And I said, why? He said, well, I don't know. I thought I would just get the new hat. And then he said, funny, he said, some kids and relatives came up to me and said, you know, that looks like the Miami Marlins logo. And I said, yes, it does. I was in Africa. And they asked me, they said, what is that Twins logo? Looks like Miami Marlins. I said, yes, it does. Now, the Twins would probably take the Miami Marlins record right now, but that's beside the point. Get rid of that logo. It's a bad luck logo. Just the TC. You got a classic TC. Use it. Get rid of that stupid M. It's costing you wins on a daily basis.
Wow. And the mood meter says he's a sarcastic Sam.
Yeah,
how about that? Well, how about just swapping out the Marlins for the Twins? Then you'd have a team with a winning record, and you'd get Luis Ariz back.
I'd like to have him back, for sure.
I kind of like that M logo with the North Star.
Oh, of course you do.
It's stamped on the dugout now at Target Field.
I'm telling you.
Stamped on the right field wall.
They should put a big L for loser.
Ooh. I don't think it's going away. I think they've invested a lot into that logo.
Boy,
by the way, what was the excuse for last year's season then? They didn't have the logo then.
I don't know.
All right. Well, my take of the day is I know you're a newspaper guy. You're one of 5 people in the Twin Cities who still subscribes.
I do.
To the Minneapolis Star Tribune.
It comes to my
once upon a time we got it delivered or we bought it out of the the news box. Well, the times are a-changing, as Bob Dylan once sang.
Literally.
What in the world's going on both coasts? Let's start in New York City. The New York Times is dropping its sports section. They're going to farm it out to The Athletic. Think about that. All the teams in Gotham City, and apparently they don't matter for the New York Times. And then you go to the left coast, the paper I grew up reading, the Los Angeles Times. They're changing the entire format of their sports section.
Wow.
In the print edition, no more game stories. You won't know if Shohei hit a home run or Clayton Kershaw pitched a no-hitter. No more box scores, no more standings. It's going to be a sports magazine format. My, oh my, things have changed in the print business when it comes to newspapers.
Yeah. You still get the LA Times coming to your doorstep?
No, I used to. That thing was thick. When they dropped it on the doorstep, that was an earthquake in itself, especially the Sunday edition.
I was going to say that Sunday edition. So then my question actually becomes, do you think the Star Tribune is far behind, or because we're so colloquial here, because we put that fence up around our borders that we're very Minnesota and we want to do it our way?
I think what you just said is probably true. Minnesota's so provincial. There's no ocean here. There's not the mild weather. We tend to live for our teams here in the upper Midwest, as they do in Wisconsin and Illinois and Pennsylvania and other hardcore sports markets. I think for now, the Star Tribune will stay as is. But if the Times, New York or LA, start turning a big profit, then you know what they're going to do. That'll be the new template.
Yeah, they'll pitch the box scores, they'll pitch the standings, and then I'll pitch my subscription.
Here's my question. Shohei Ohtani, let's say he broke Aaron Judge's record for home runs in a single season, American League. Does the LA Times even print that?
I don't know. It's a good question. You have to look online.
You will. On that note, we got to go. Let's FedEx out those thank yous. One to Stewart and Alex Yambrick and David Weld and Mike Welch and Chuck Foreman. For Wally, I'm Eric saying so long. This is 10K Takes, your sports ticket.